Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the How to Succeed podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague, Director of Community Engagement at Sandler. And my guest this week is Will Guidara. He is the best-selling author of Unreasonable Hospitality and former co-owner of 11 Madison Park. That's really where he got his hospitality notoriety, where he did incredible things, including getting like 3 Michelin stars and the #1 spot on the world's 50 best restaurant list. That's incredible. We're going to find out how you can adopt the mindset and strategy of unreasonable hospitality next year with Will Guidara. It's how to succeed at unreasonable hospitality. All right, Will, let's start with unreasonable hospitality. How did you come up with this name and what does that mean to you? Hint, I've seen a little bit of your stuff. You can maybe share the hot dog story. I like that one a lot, but what does unreasonable hospitality mean?
So unreasonable hospitality came when we decided we really wanted to make a go at becoming the #1 restaurant in the world. It actually happened because we were added to the list for the first time, and it's the 50 best. They ranked the top 50 in the world. We went over there for the first time and came in last place. We were in number 50.
Hey, I'd take number 50 for sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah. In one sense, that's great. In the other sense, in that room, we were last place. And
yeah.
And I think, man, I'm so grateful that we came in last place that year because it certainly got my competitive juices flowing. My dad gave me this paperweight when I was a kid. It said, "What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail?" And he'd always challenge me to ask that question or answer that question. And whatever the answer was, to just try to do that. And he'd always say that far too many people are scared to say their most audacious goals out loud for fear that if they do and don't achieve them, they'll let themselves and those around them down. But he'd always go on to say that if you don't have the confidence and conviction to dream big out loud, it's unlikely your biggest dreams will ever come true. And so literally the night we came in number 50, like any mature professional, we left the party early, went back to the hotel and started drinking some whiskey and processing through all of that. And this is what we came to. I mean, listen, it's patently absurd to say that one restaurant is the best in the entire world. What that list acknowledges is the restaurant that's having the greatest impact on the world of restaurants at any given time. Anytime I'm trying to accomplish something or succeed at something, I like to study those that have done it before me. And when I looked at the restaurants that had topped that list before us or before that moment, each one of them did so by focusing on their product, by being unreasonable in pursuit of technique and plating and presentation and ingredients, and relentless in pursuit of how to evolve the conversation around those things. That night, I asked myself that question that my dad gave me on the paperweight and wrote on a cocktail napkin, "We will be #1 in the world." But a goal without a strategy is nothing more than a pipe dream. I needed to figure out what our impact was going to be. And I thought about those chefs. If they were unreasonable in pursuit of product, I wanted to be unreasonable in pursuit of people and in pursuit of the one thing that will never change, which is our human desire to feel seen, to feel a sense of belonging, our need to feel welcome. And so underneath, "We will be #1," I wrote those 2 words, unreasonable hospitality. Then the next day I got on the plane to head back home and quickly realized I had no idea what those words meant. But I think that's okay. I think far too many people spend so much time trying to perfectly articulate a goal or an idea or a mission or a strategy that they never actually start pursuing anything. I think if you feel enough of a connection to an idea, you need to trust in the fact that as you pursue it, it will reveal itself to you along the way. And so it did with me, because my team and I, every day, we'd talk about how to be more unreasonable in pursuit of how we were making people feel. And then I'll tell the story that you mentioned, because about a year and a half later, I found myself clearing tables. It was a busier lunch than normal, and so I needed to help the servers. And I was clearing plates from a table of 4 people. They were foodies who were on vacation to New York. And they'd been all over New York eating at restaurants, and this was their last meal. They were going to the airport after their meal to head back home. And as I was clearing the plates, I overheard them talking, and they were going on and on about all the amazing meals they had. Per se, Le Bernardin, Jean-Georges, Danielle, Momofuku, now Madison Park. But then one woman jumped in and said, yeah, but the only thing we didn't have was a New York City hot dog. And it was like one of those light bulb moments in a cartoon. I walked as calmly as I could back into the kitchen, dropped off the plates, and literally ran outside to the hot dog cart that lived in front of the restaurant, bought a hot dog, ran back inside, somehow convinced the chef to agree to serve it in our fancy restaurant. And we cut it up into these 4 pieces and made it look all beautiful with artfully added ketchup and mustard and sauerkraut and relish. And before their final savory course, which at the time was a honey lavender glazed Muscovy duck that had been dry aged for 2 weeks, I brought over what we in New York call a dirty water dog. And man, they freaked out. Up until that point in my career, I mean, I'd served millions of dollars worth of food. Wagyu beef, foie gras, caviar, lobster. And I'd never seen anyone react to anything I served them like they did to that hot dog. Athletes always go to the tapes and they've had a bad game to see what they did wrong, to see what they could do better. They don't often enough go to the tapes and they've had a good game to see what they did well, to make sure they keep on doing that thing. That's how you take these moments of organic brilliance that happen in every culture and you grab onto them and you hold onto them and you put systems behind them to make them a part of the fabric of your organization. And so I went to the tapes on the hot dog. What happened such that that happened? And how could we make sure it started happening all the time? First, it required being present, which, by the way, in hospitality is everything. And although being present is kind of an overused, like, woo-woo thing these days, it matters. For me, being present is just caring so much about the person you're with that you stop caring about all the things you need to do. If we don't have the capacity to slow down for long enough to actually listen, if we don't understand that sometimes multitasking is actually inefficient because it deprives us of the ability to genuinely connect with the people we're with, then we're leaving opportunities on the table. So being present. Second, it required this notion that, yeah, we need to take what we do seriously. We're in business. We should take that seriously, but we need to stop taking ourselves so seriously. Because way too often in customer service, we let these self-imposed standards get in the way of us doing the things that will actually bring people around us joy. A hot dog in a 4-star restaurant is not normal until you look at how it made them feel. And then third, it required the acknowledgement that if hospitality is about making people feel seen, the best way to do that is by extending gestures that are specific to them. Because in Unreasonable Hospitality, one size fits one. And so that hot dog was the North Star. Those 3 things became our roadmap, and me and the entire team started doing things like that constantly. And in doing so, finally learned what unreasonable hospitality meant.
And got you the #1 spot, which is amazing. You hit the goal and everything too, but it also got you this best-selling book about it. And I want to direct everybody to that. They can go to unreasonablehospitality.com and find more information, or wherever books are sold. But I got to imagine in this journey, you've had a lot of people give you a lot of excuses of why it won't work. Like, it's going to cost too much money. It's scary. I don't know how to listen like that. I don't have any, brilliant ideas. What do you feel like is the most common misconception in this concept?
Well, surprisingly, that's only happened a few times. In fact, most people feel emboldened and excited and inspired to pursue it. The common misconception is, listen, this is not hard. It just requires trying harder. Mm-hmm. It requires caring more and trying harder. One of the things that people always say is, how do I get my team on board with this? And that's actually not the hard part. And the reason is because unreasonable hospitality is a win-win-win when you approach your business through this lens. Obviously, it's good for the people you're serving. You're creating these amazing experiences for them. It's also really good for the bottom line because, yes, it does cost some money, right? If you're trying to do anything, you need to put some amount of investment behind it, whether it's capital or time or money, however you want to think about it. But I believe every dollar and every minute I have invested in unreasonable hospitality has had a much bigger return than any dollar I ever put towards traditional marketing. Because you think about the people that receive the hot dog, I guarantee you they've told that story thousands of times. right? When you give people a story to tell that evokes a certain emotion in them, they're inclined to want to tell it. And guess what? Everyone who hears that story wants to do. They want to go see it for themselves. Anyone
And what
who's in
about for the employees themselves? Because one of the things I wanted to ask you today is I feel like the same thing as somebody who um, coaches and trains leaders, that treating your employees are the same way. That when you create a magical experience for an employee, they stick around longer. They become more valuable. They start spreading this. I agree with you. I think one of the easier parts is getting the team on board, but sometimes finding the leadership, being willing to invest in their people like that, or creating this culture in the first part is tough when they're trying to just survive in business or to save the most amount of money on the overhead of their employee salaries and things. I think those are the misconceptions or misinformed beliefs that I hear a lot.
Well, I mean, listen, I believe just giving your team the permission and the resources to do this kind of thing is in its own way an expression of hospitality towards them. Because when you create this kind of environment, when you invite everyone on the team to the table to imbue the experience with their own creativity and to allow them to come up with ideas and then see those ideas come to life, it's transformational. I've yet to meet a single person who won't give more of themselves to help something succeed than when they feel a genuine sense of ownership in what that thing is. Not to mention the fact that when you're effectively giving people the gift of being able to give other people gifts, and I know of nothing more energizing than seeing the look on someone else's face when they receive a gift you're responsible for giving them. I think right now so many people are dealing with the staffing crisis that we've been going through for so long by paying people a little bit more, or, giving them a bit more time off. But all of that is treating the symptoms as opposed to the underlying illness, which is making the work fulfilling. And then, yes, of course, if you're creating a culture where you're inspiring everyone on the team to be unreasonably hospitable to your customers, it's organically going to become one where they're expressing that to one another as well. And yeah, you have a responsibility to do the same in return.
And then I've heard you give lots of different examples of this. I love the hot dog story because it's simple, it's easy. You are listening, you can pull all of those lessons out of it that you mentioned there. But I know for me, it seems like these ideas are a little bit of a whisper, and sometimes they're fleeting. Like you just miss it, and you're like, "Oh, it would have been cool to do that," but they left. And like any good salesperson, since we have thousands of salespeople listening to this, it's when you get in the car after the call that you're like, "Oh, you know what I should have said? That would have been great." Do you have any advice for us on how to recognize these better in the moment, or when you realize that timing? I guess we're in our behavior thing. How do we do the right thing at the right time and not? Sometimes that gifts. Maybe you could correct me on this one, and maybe it's a second question. So sometimes I hate it when I give my guests 3 questions, but I also feel like
keep on going. I have them all up here.
Yeah.
I'll answer them in the order.
All right. So the second part of the question is sometimes I'm too early too, that I want to do something unreasonable, or I want to connect with somebody and they're a complete stranger, and it feels weird giving them a special gift. And I guess sometimes it can be more magical, but I also feel like sometimes I hold on or hold back because I'm like, I don't know this person well enough to really wow them with the love, care, and attention that you're talking about.
Okay, so I have 3
So the
things.
big question is, how do I do the right thing at the right time? How do I not screw it up and go early or late?
So one is, I don't think that there's like, the window doesn't ever fully close on generosity and graciousness. If you met with someone and then afterwards you're like, "Oh shoot, I wish I'd done this," you can still do it. And right, like, just put yourself in the position of the person you're serving. If someone was serving you and 3 days later than they should have, they sent you some awesome gift that made you feel seen, you're gonna be like, "Damn them!" Like, no, obviously not.
Yeah,
That's one. 2, I do believe when you talk about the early thing that you need to be willing to take hospitable leaps of faith sometimes, and know that sometimes it's going to fall flat. Like, we did thousands of these gestures, and like probably 2% of them just didn't land. Right. But I would always tell my team, like, I'd rather us do thousands and have 98% work than always play it safe and only do a few hundred and be batting 100%. And so, like, you can't let the moments where things fall flat compel you to never try again. I wouldn't be married if that were the case. But the other thing I'd say is this. I believe one of the most effective ways to integrate these ideas into a culture in a consistent and sustainable way is not with the improvisational reactive things I'm talking about. Those are special. Those are the legends. Those do a lot of heavy lifting in terms of getting the culture to understand these principles and compelling the world to understand that this is how you think. But I think through simple pattern recognition of recurring moments, you can do pretty extraordinary work. Anyone, whatever you do, if you actually take a few hours with your team and start to think about all the recurring moments that happen. So like in a restaurant, someone's celebrating a birthday, someone's getting engaged, someone's celebrating an anniversary. A table of 4 shows up as a table of 3 because one person got sick and had to stay home. Someone's on their way to the airport after their meal. Someone says, oh man, I drank too much, I'm going to be hungover tomorrow. Whatever they are, the things that just happen consistently. And then through a bit of intention and creativity, prepare in advance a toolkit of things that you're going to deploy when those things happen. You don't need to be creative in the moment. You know that these things are going to happen anyway, and now you know exactly how you're going to make someone feel special when they do.
I love that. That's exactly the answer I was looking for. So thank you for decoding my question. At Sandler, sometimes we talk about if it happens 3 or more times in a relatively short amount of time. So it kind of depends on your sales cycle or how long you're with clients and things. But if something comes up 3 or more times that you're like, ooh, I'm getting a message here that this is a repeating pattern, not like just once a year we have to plan for this because something crazy happened, but if it's happening on a regular basis, that's something that you can plan for. You can make a best practice, a playbook.
I guarantee you there's more recurring moments than any group will be able to figure out how to react to for a very long time, right? There's a long list. No matter what you do, there's a long list, and it'll take you a couple of years before you've chipped away through every single one of them. It doesn't take time to find them.
And let's talk about here technique in our final bucket. These are the tips, tools, and tactics. I think in hospitality, and from what I'm getting from you, there is the obvious part of whatever it is that you deliver, the service part of what you're doing. I'm imagining you also have some tips or on decision-making or tools that you use that are outside of what you do, like the experience part or the referrals and other parts that kind of make it more viral, where there's other people involved as well. Have you done much thought about the tools or the techniques of how you create an unreasonable hospitality moment?
I've been very good at tracking all your questions to this point. I'm struggling a little bit with this one.
Okay, well, here's what I'm thinking. I think most people are not very creative. So they're going to say like, oh, it's just more money. Like if they, can we give them a free dessert? Can we give them more of what we're currently doing rather than doing something outside the box? Like it's not really, they came there for a meal in your case, or they come to us for sales training. It's not necessarily about what happens in that room or with the part that they exchanged with us. So I guess the question I wanted to ask you was, how do you identify those moments that are outside of what you're trying to deliver? You told a story about like the people that didn't get to go to the beach or something, and you created a beach scene in the restaurant. And that's not about the food. That wasn't delivering a great steak. That's something that's outside of the service promise.
At the end of the day, the product is just the product, right? And by the way, there's a million people, no matter what you're doing, that can sell a better product than whatever you're selling. some people are listening and they're like, no, there's not a million people. All right, there's going to be someone out there that can sell a better product than you. Yeah. I'd say a few different things. One, in restaurants, and I believe that this applies to no matter what you do, the food, the service, and the design are simply ingredients in the recipe of human connection. Listen, America was a manufacturing economy for a very, very long time. Now it's a service economy, right? And I believe that in this moment in time, especially following the disconnection we all felt during the pandemic, and now the disconnection people continue to feel, whether through remote work or hybrid work, or now the prevalence of AI, right? Like, the best thing we can do is to approach our work in a more human and connective way. And that never happens through the product. It happens through how you make people feel. And there's a great quote by Maya Angelou: people will forget what you say, they'll forget what you do, they'll never forget how you made them feel. Anyone who's trying to create a moat around their business, unless you're like Apple or Legos or someone, especially people in sales and customer service, the best moat you can create comes from making meaningful investments in your relationship capital accounts. Because again, I don't care how good you are, someone younger, smarter, richer, more creative is going to come around with a better product. But relationships take a long time to build. And if you build them correctly and engender quite a bit of loyalty, they take a long time to erode as well. People don't collect things anymore. They collect experiences. And so we have an opportunity to give people stories to tell that can help them relive those experiences over and over and over again. And whether it's the people that had the hot dog, or to your point, the people who we built a beach for in the private dining room, or the people we gave sleds to or celebrated weddings for, there's a million of these examples that we did because it spread like a virus through my organization. They'll remember those things much more than they'll ever remember a single plate of food. In most organizations, people, it's like this quote from a famous economist: what gets measured gets managed. People will only invest in things where they see a very clearly defined return on that investment. Investing in people is hard to measure, but that doesn't mean it matters less. In fact, in most cases, it matters more. And so how do you do it? Well, like I said, be present. Don't take yourself too seriously. One size fits one. And then give the people around you the permission and the resources to bring their own creativity to the table. It will make your business better, but it'll also feel really, really good. And here's the deal. I know I'm talking to a bunch of salespeople. I think one of the coolest things about this is when you infuse unreasonable hospitality into your culture, it turns salespeople into product designers. Because for my team, once we started this, we were no longer just serving plates of food that someone else created. We were imbuing that experience with our own selves and our own creative ideas, and the amount of ownership we felt over making that experience phenomenal once we actually had the ability to contribute to what it was. Well, it was nothing short of extraordinary.
I love that. I'm going to ask you here in a second any other final thoughts or questions I should have missed, but I had one more for you, which is you mentioned measurement. And did you specifically track ROI, referrals, reviews, any types of metrics along this way, or very much going by the I love the feel, because I think you're right. I think people know, and I think it's such a big difference that you don't really need to track it. When you create this unreasonable hospitality or this moment for people, this feeling, we don't need to ask them to put a score on it on a scale of 1 to 10, right?
We have this terribly unhealthy obsession with needing to measure everything, and I think it's killing creativity and it's killing connectivity. I mean, the number of brands I work with who like need to track social media impressions against spends.
Yeah.
But by the way, I think it's becoming increasingly clear with the companies that are forward thinking that is an antiquated and archaic approach to take. And anyone out there who's still only spending against like things that are completely measured are already in the past now.
Well, I was going to ask you about AI too. I'm assuming that because you had such a human message there, that isn't any tech tools or AI that can make this happen for you or assist with this, that you're really looking for those magic human moments with relationships.
No.
Where I think
AI is an unbelievable tool.
Yeah.
I think it just depends on how you use it. I think a lot of people are going to be using AI to replace humans, and then the ones that really thrive will be using AI to make human beings more human. And what I mean when I say that is like, listen, a lot of what you need to make people feel seen and known, like you need to know stuff about them, right? And like we used to do it the old-fashioned way. We'd listen, we'd take notes, we'd document those things. But if you can expedite and put a lot of efficiency on that process such that you're going to the table armed with everything you need to know such that the experience you're serving someone is truly unique to them, that's unbelievable. And any amount of AI that can create efficiencies and require your system to rely less on humans in the parts of the transaction that aren't impactful only free up the humans to be more connective with the time they've just saved.
Yeah, that's great. I'm actually giving a speech on that here in a few weeks about there's AI tools that can tell you their personality profiles and how they're likely to communicate or like to be engaged, or data on their background and experience, so you can make more relevant, like you said, one-to-one sales presentations and outreach and stuff. So I think that's
send me the details. I want to watch that presentation.
I'm at Inbound in Boston for HubSpot, so
cool.
It's a great one, and it'll be public for anybody that wants to go, for sure. Last question here: anything in the book or in your experience that I forgot to ask? Anything you want to share?
I mean, we did not just cover the entire content of the book, so there's a lot of stuff.
Exactly.
No, man, I think we hit some good highlights, honestly.
All right, great. Now I want to get to know you a little bit better. I saved this for the end. Maybe after our conversation, I should move these up. But this is our magic moment where we get to see behind the scenes. And I want to ask you first, how you define success for yourself at this point in your career. After you hit number one, how do you redefine that and realize that like maybe the benchmark isn't what success means?
I mean, for me now, success, I only do any new project at this point if it checks 3 boxes. If I'm doing it with people I enjoy spending time with, if I'm learning something new along the way, and if it makes me money. If it doesn't do all 3 of those things, I don't want to do it, which is different. That's not always been the case. In other seasons of my life, well, I wanted to make money, but it didn't require the other 2. And I think as I get older, unless all 3 things are true, it's just not enriching enough to deserve the investment of time.
Yeah, I like that answer. I got to get number 3 in there more. I still like to do fun things that lose me money. Okay. On the flip side, was there a biggest lesson learned or a failure you are most proud of that sort of helped you get to the point where you're successful, or that you had to get past in order to be successful?
I mean, my biggest struggle is, which I haven't gotten past, I don't think I'll ever get past it, is just balancing control and creativity. You don't become the kind of restaurant we were unless you're pretty controlling, right? Like every single detail needs to be just so. And yet, in a world where I controlled every little detail of this restaurant, at the very end, I would allow the team to go out there and come up with their own ideas. And as I already said, those are the things that the guest was going to remember more than anything else. Those 2 things are in tension with one another. Hospitality and excellence are not friends. It's choosing those conflicting goals and creating space for both of them to coexist that ultimately made us who we were. That said, it is walking a line. And, I believe that my salespeople, my servers, unless they were, perfectly trained and knew every single detail of the experience, we couldn't thrive. And yet at the same time, if they weren't given space to bring their most fully realized selves to the table, the experience would feel inauthentic. And there's plenty of times I went too far in either direction, either falling short in our execution on some of the details, or taking away some of the autonomy and disempowering my team. And because I've made mistakes in dramatic ways on either side, it's made me realize I need to always really be disciplined and intentional with staying as close to that line as possible. And when I'm right on the line, that's when we're thriving.
I like that one a lot. I think two things can be true at the same time. And a lot of times people feel like you have to choose one or the other. And I love making mistakes on the edges. That's how you find out where the boundaries are, and you learn and grow. So great lesson there. Do you have a favorite quote?
My favorite quote is my dad's. He has so many quotes. I could literally rattle off a ton, but adversity is a terrible thing to waste.
Ooh, that's a good one.
You can't control what life throws at you, but you can control how you react to it.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, the book, Unreasonable Hospitality, available at the website, anywhere you buy books. You can find Will Guidara online and pretty much everywhere. Got the handle on the video right now if you're watching the video version of this. Anything else you'd like to add? Any asks or gifts for the audience before we go?
What a pleasure it was to spend time with you today.
Thanks, man. Great conversation. I love it when we learn good stuff and we challenge the boundaries of what we think we know and stuff along the way too. I appreciate it. All right. Until next time, you can subscribe to the podcast. Anywhere you're listening to this or watching it right now would be a good place to start. Also, you can find out more. The podcast is copyrighted by Sandler Systems LLC. And remember, whatever you are, be a good one. That's what I always say. We'll see you next time.